Marcus Sterling never begged for anything in his life. But seeing the blood pool beneath his assistant on the rain-slicked asphalt of the harbor, the ruthless head of the Sterling syndicate fell to his knees. The order he gave next would drown the entire city in fire. The city's underworld was a machine, and Marcus Sterling was the engine that drove it. As the head of the Sterling syndicate, he governed the city with a fist of iron and ice. Men feared him, enemies avoided his gaze. But the machine did not run on fear alone. It ran on the quiet, unassuming brilliance of Claire Whitfield. Claire was not the kind of woman usually found in the dark, glamorous corridors of organized crime. She did not have the sharp, starved angles of the socialites who threw themselves at Marcus. Nor did she possess the hollow perfection of the underground club dancers. Claire was soft. She was plus-sized, carrying lush, generous curves that Marcus secretly found himself tracking whenever she moved around his sprawling office. But beneath that soft, inviting exterior was a woman forged from titanium. Claire was his executive assistant, a title that vastly understated her role. She was the keeper of his secrets, the architect of his money-laundering operations, and the only person on Earth who could look Marcus in the eye when his temper threatened to shatter the room. Her resilience was a quiet ocean. Nothing rattled her. Not the federal raids, not the death threats, not the bloody reality of his business. She grounded him. She was the one untouched thing in his corrupted world, and over the past 3 years, Marcus had developed an obsession with her that bordered on the psychotic. He kept it buried, knowing his dark world would only taint her, but he guarded her with a shadow detail of his best men. Until tonight. The rain was coming down in sheets across the harbor district. Marcus had been delayed in a meeting with the heads of the rival families. Claire had stayed late at Sterling headquarters finalizing the ledgers for their new shipping ports. Marcus had told her to wait for him, that he would drive her home himself. It was a selfish demand born of his need to smell her vanilla perfume and hear the soothing cadence of her voice after a brutal day of negotiations. He stepped out of the high-rise, surrounded by his lieutenants, the frigid wind biting at his charcoal-tailored suit. His eyes immediately scanned the curb for her. He saw her standing under a black umbrella near the corner of the street, clutching a leather briefcase to her chest. She wore a deep burgundy trench coat that hugged her waist. Her dark curls framed a face that always managed to bring Marcus a fleeting sense of peace. Then the roar of an engine tore through the storm. A heavy armored black SUV with tinted windows came tearing around the blind corner. It did not swerve. It did not brake. It accelerated with purposeful, lethal intent, aiming directly for the corner where Claire stood. Marcus felt his heart stop. A primal, guttural roar ripped from his throat. He lunged forward, his expensive shoes slipping on the wet pavement, but he was too far. The impact was a sickening thud that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. Claire was thrown, her umbrella flying into the dark sky, the briefcase tumbling to the asphalt. The SUV did not even pause. It corrected its course and sped off into the night, the tail lights bleeding into the rain. But in that fraction of a second before the vehicle disappeared, Marcus saw it. The faint silver crest on the rear bumper. The stag of the Ashford syndicate. Vivian Ashford, the British heiress, had recently taken over her father's empire and had been pushing into Sterling territory for months. She was ruthless, theatrical, and desperate to prove she could break the legendary Marcus Sterling. She had just made the final mistake of her life. Marcus reached Claire before his guards even drew their weapons. He dropped to his knees, not caring that the freezing puddle was soaking through his trousers. He gathered her broken, soft body into his arms. Blood was already mingling with the rain, staining her burgundy coat a terrifying crimson. Her eyes fluttered open, heavy and glazed with pain. Even now, facing death, the sheer force of Claire's will was staggering. She did not scream. She did not cry. She reached up with a trembling, bloodied hand and gripped the lapel of his jacket. "The ledgers," she whispered, her voice barely a breath against the roaring wind. "I kept them safe. They didn't get to the briefcase, Marcus." Marcus felt a tear break free, mixing with the rain on his face. He pressed his forehead to hers, his hands shaking as he cradled her head. "Forget the damned ledgers, Claire. Stay with me. Do you hear me?" "You do not have my permission to close your eyes." "I think my ribs are broken," she murmured, offering him a faint, terribly sad smile. "You're crushing me, boss." He loosened his grip slightly but refused to let her go. His underboss, Ethan, was screaming into a phone for a private ambulance. The street was chaotic, men running, weapons drawn. But for Marcus, the world had shrunk down to the agonizingly slow rise and fall of Claire's chest. She was so pale, the vibrant, curvy woman who filled his life with warmth was bleeding out in his arms, and it was his fault. He had dragged her into this life. He had made her a target. Vivian Ashford had wanted to send a message. She had targeted the one person Marcus kept close, thinking she was striking at his weak point. She did not realize she had just unsealed the gates of hell. The private wing of the hospital was a fortress. 50 armed men from the Sterling Syndicate locked down every entrance, stairwell, and elevator. Nurses and doctors moved with terrified precision, flanked by men in dark suits who watched their every move. At the center of the storm stood Marcus Sterling. He had not changed his clothes. His shirt was soaked in Claire's blood, drying into stiff, rusty patches. He paced the length of the pristine white corridor outside the surgical theater, a caged predator waiting to be unchained. The scent of alcohol made him nauseous. It smelled like death. It smelled like the countless men he had put in the ground. But this was different. This was Claire. Ethan stepped off the heavily guarded elevator, his face grim. He approached Marcus with the caution one might use when approaching a live bomb. "We found the SUV," Ethan reported, keeping his voice low. "Abandoned and torched in an alley across town. The plates were stolen, but our contacts at the port confirmed it. It was one of Vivian Ashford's crews. They were tracking Claire's phone signal. Vivian's celebrating at her penthouse right now. She thinks she crippled our operation by taking out your brain trust." Marcus stopped pacing. He turned slowly to face Ethan, and the look in his eyes made his hardened underboss take a half step back. There was no rage in Marcus's expression. There was only a terrifying, hollow void. The civilized businessman that Marcus had portrayed for the last 5 years was gone. The monster that had carved the Sterling Empire out of bone and blood had returned. "Give the order," Marcus said, his voice flat and dead. Ethan swallowed hard. "Which order, boss? A surgical strike? We can send a hit squad to her penthouse by dawn." "I did not say send a hit squad," Marcus replied, stepping closer, the sheer malice radiating off him, dropping the temperature in the hall. "I want Vivian Ashford to watch her world burn before she dies. I want every warehouse she owns on the docks reduced to ash. I want every legitimate business front she runs in the city firebombed. I want the men who drove that SUV found, and I want them to suffer. And as for Vivian, kill her lieutenants, kill her captains, kill anyone who has ever taken $1 from her hand." Ethan stared at him in shock. "Marcus, if we do that, we break the treaty. The rival families will retaliate. The feds will crack down on our streets. It will be an all-out war. We could lose everything." "Did I stutter, Ethan?" Marcus roared, the sudden explosion of sound echoing down the sterile hallway. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the treaty. Vivian touched what is mine. I will wipe her bloodline from the face of the earth. Burn it all down!" "No." Ethan nodded hastily, pulling his phone from his pocket and walking away to deliver a command that would plunge the entire region into a bloody gang war. Everyone in the syndicate knew Marcus valued Claire, but no one understood the depths of his depraved, possessive devotion until this exact moment. He was sacrificing his empire for a plus-sized assistant from the suburbs. Hours bled into the night. The doors to the surgical wing finally swung open, and the lead surgeon emerged, looking exhausted and terrified. Marcus was on him in an instant. "She's stable, Mr. Sterling," the surgeon stammered, holding up his hands. 3 broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, and a severe concussion. We had to repair a ruptured spleen, which was the source of the internal bleeding. It was remarkably close, but she's young and strong. She pulled through the surgery. She's resting in the ICU now. Marcus bypassed the doctor without a word, pushing through the double doors. The room was dark, illuminated only by the rhythmic blinking of the heart monitor. Claire looked impossibly small in the center of the hospital bed, hooked up to a dozen tubes and wires. Her usually rosy, full cheeks were pale, and her dark hair was spread across the pillow. Marcus walked to her bedside, his knees trembling. The ruthless boss, the man who had just ordered the destruction of hundreds of lives, sank into the plastic chair beside her bed and buried his face in his hands. A ragged, broken breath escaped him. He sat there for an hour, just listening to the steady beat of her heart, letting it tether him to reality. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand, mindful of the IV line. Her fingers were cold. He pressed them to his lips, kissing her knuckles, closing his eyes as he inhaled the lingering scent of vanilla and hospital soap. "You are going to be all right, mio cuore," he whispered against her skin. "I swear to you, no one will ever hurt you again." A soft, dry rasp broke the silence of the room. "You look terrible, boss." Marcus's head snapped up. Claire's eyes were half open, heavy with painkillers, but the sharp, resilient spark that he loved so much was still there. She tried to shift, wincing as the movement pulled at her broken ribs. "Don't move," Marcus commanded softly, standing up and leaning over her. He reached out, his blood-stained hand gently brushing a stray curl away from her forehead. His touch was so reverent, so completely at odds with the violence he had just unleashed. "I'm right here, Claire. I'm not going anywhere." Claire looked at his shirt, her eyes focusing on the dried blood. "Is that mine?" she asked, her voice raspy. "It doesn't matter." He deflected, his thumb stroking her cheek. She swallowed, her brilliant mind already working through the fog of the narcotics. "The briefcase, the ledgers for the shipping ports." "I have them. They're safe. You protected them." Claire let out a slow breath, her body relaxing slightly against the mattress. "Vivian Ashford is a fool," she whispered. Marcus's jaw tightened at the name. "Vivian is a dead woman walking. Her empire is all ready. I have my men leveling everything she owns." Claire's eyes widened slightly, the shock penetrating the drugs. "Marcus, no, you cannot start a war over me. The treaty. To hell with the treaty," Marcus snarled, though his voice remained low. "They can all burn! She tried to take you from me! She tried to take the only light in my miserable existence!" Claire looked up at him, seeing past the terrifying mask of the boss, straight into the desperate, obsessed man beneath. Her soft, curvy frame felt broken, but her spirit refused to shatter. She tightened her weak grip on his hand. "Stop the firebombing," she said, her tone suddenly shifting from assistant to strategist. Marcus frowned. "Claire, she tried to kill you. And she failed," Claire replied, her gaze piercing his. "But if you burn the city tonight, the feds will raid our ports by tomorrow. We lose the shipments from Europe. Vivian wants you to react blindly. She wants you to look like a mad dog, so the other families turn against you. Don't give her what she wants." Marcus stared at her in awe. Here she was, battered and stitched together, plotting the survival of his empire from a hospital bed. Her resilience was intoxicating. "What do you suggest then?" he asked, completely surrendering to her intellect. Claire offered a small, dangerous smile that made Marcus's dark heart beat faster. "Before the SUV hit me, I saw the driver. It wasn't one of her street thugs. It was Oliver Ashford, her younger brother. I recognized the scar on his neck from the files I organized last week." Marcus froze. Vivian's brother, the heir to the Ashford family. "Don't burn her warehouses, Marcus," Claire whispered, pulling his hand closer to her chest. "Take her, brother. Break her heart before you take her life." A slow, predatory grin spread across Marcus's face. He leaned down, his lips brushing against her forehead. "As you wish, my brilliant queen." 2 days later, Oliver Ashford was hanging by his wrists in a soundproofed subterranean bunker beneath Marcus Sterling's sprawling countryside estate. Oliver was young, reckless, and accustomed to the immunity his sister's reputation provided. That illusion of safety shattered the moment Ethan and a crew of Sterling enforcers dragged him out of the VIP room of a high-end nightclub, stuffing him into a trunk before his bodyguards even realized he was missing. Marcus stood in the dimly lit bunker, his pristine tailored suit a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. He casually adjusted his cufflinks, watching as Ethan tossed a bucket of ice water over the bruised and battered heir to the Ashford syndicate. Oliver gasped, coughing up water and blood, his eyes wide with terror as he looked at the boss of the Sterling family. "You're making a mistake," Oliver stammered, shivering violently against his chains. Vivian will kill you! She will tear this city apart to find me. Marcus stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking against the concrete floor. His expression was a mask of cold, unfeeling stone. He reached out and grabbed Oliver by the throat, squeezing just enough to cut off his air supply. Your sister is a dead woman, Marcus said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. But she's going to suffer first. You see, Oliver, you made a very specific mistake when you decided to play driver for her little assassination attempt. You targeted the only thing in this world I care about. Marcus released his grip, letting Oliver choke and gasp for air. He pulled a sleek, encrypted phone from his jacket pocket and dialed Vivian's personal number. He put it on speaker. It rang only twice before she answered. Where is my brother, you psychotic bastard? Vivian's voice crackled through the speaker, laced with a panic she was desperately trying to hide. Marcus smiled, a hollow, predatory thing. He's currently enjoying the hospitality of my estate. I believe he's regretting his choice of vehicle. Listen to me, Sterling, Vivian hissed. If you touch one hair on his head, I will bring the full weight of the commission down on you. I will tell them you broke the truce. You already broke the truce, Vivian, Marcus replied smoothly. And as for the commission, they're currently receiving a very interesting dossier. My assistant, from her hospital bed, managed to compile a list of your offshore accounts, your embezzled funds, and the shipments you've been stealing from the other families. You're bleeding them dry to fund your little war in this city. Once they see the proof, they will not protect you. They will beg me to put you down. There was a long, suffocating silence on the line. Vivian's bravado vanished, replaced by the chilling realization that she had been completely outmaneuvered by the very woman she had tried to run over. What do you want, Marcus? Vivian finally asked, her voice trembling. I want you to meet me tonight. Pier 44. Come alone. If you bring a single gun, if you alert a single soldier, I will send Oliver back to you in pieces. Marcus ended the call without waiting for a reply. He handed the phone to Ethan. Prep the cars. We end this tonight. Leaving the bunker, Marcus walked up the spiral staircase into the main wing of his estate. The oppressive, violent energy radiating from him softened the moment he approached the master suite. He pushed the heavy oak double doors open. Claire was propped up against a mountain of plush pillows on his massive king-sized bed, surrounded by laptops, scattered files, and secure tablets. She was wearing one of his oversized black dress shirts, the dark fabric providing a beautiful contrast to her pale, soft skin and the rich curves that the shirt could not hide. She looked exhausted, her breathing shallow due to her broken ribs, but her dark eyes were sharp and focused on a glowing screen. Marcus felt an agonizing twist in his chest. He crossed the room and gently took the laptop from her lap, placing it on the nightstand. I told you to rest, he scolded softly, sitting on the edge of the mattress. I was just verifying the routing numbers for Vivian's accounts in the Caymans, Claire protested weakly. If we want the commission to turn a blind eye to what you do tonight, the financial trail has to be bulletproof. It's bulletproof because you built it, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. He reached out, his knuckles lightly grazing her soft, full cheek. He traced the line of her jaw, his thumb brushing over her bottom lip. You've given me her empire on a silver platter, Claire. You've given me her brother. You've orchestrated her complete ruin while heavily medicated. Claire leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. She was supposed to be his employee. A barrier had always existed between them, a professional wall that Marcus had erected to keep his darkness from consuming her light. But the wall had shattered the moment her blood hit the pavement. You're going to meet her tonight, Claire murmured, opening her eyes to meet his piercing gaze. Yes, Marcus admitted. I'm coming with you. Marcus stiffened, his protective instincts flaring into a blinding rage. Absolutely not. You can barely walk. You're staying here behind a wall of 50 armed guards until I return. Claire did not flinch at his tone. She slowly reached out, her warm, soft fingers wrapping around his wrist. Because she's desperate, Marcus. A desperate animal is unpredictable. You're blinded by your anger. You want to kill her so badly you might miss a trap. I will not let you walk into an ambush because you're busy avenging me. I am your strategist. Let me do my job. Marcus stared down at her, mesmerized. She was completely unapologetic in her brilliance. She possessed a quiet, terrifying strength that rivaled any hardened criminal he had ever met. He looked at her generous curves, the soft swell of her beneath his shirt, the fullness of her frame hidden under the sheets. She was soft everywhere. His world was hard, yet she possessed a spine of absolute steel. He leaned down, hovering inches from her lips, breathing in her sweet vanilla scent. I am a monster, Claire. And yet you are trying to protect me because you are my monster, she whispered back, the confession hanging heavy and absolute in the quiet room. Marcus groaned, closing the distance and pressing his lips to hers. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a claiming, a desperate, possessive kiss that tasted of fear, relief, and a dark, obsessive love that had finally broken free. Claire gasped against his mouth, her hands tangling in his dark hair as he carefully, painstakingly avoided putting any pressure on her injured ribs. He kissed her until they were both breathless, completely cementing the fact that she was no longer just his assistant. She was his queen. Pier 44 was an abandoned cargo terminal jutting out into the freezing water. The fog rolled in thick and heavy, obscuring the distant city lights. The only illumination came from the headlights of Marcus's armored fleet, casting long, menacing shadows across the wet concrete. Marcus stood at the forefront, his dark overcoat billowing in the wind. Beside him, bundled in a thick cashmere coat and leaning heavily on a custom cane, was Claire. She was pale, every breath a battle against her bruised ribs. But she stood tall, refusing to show a single ounce of weakness. A dozen of Sterling's most lethal enforcers stood behind them, utterly silent. The sound of a lone engine pierced the fog. A sleek silver sedan slowly drove down the pier, coming to a halt 20 yards away. The driver's side door opened, and Vivian Ashford stepped out. She looked entirely different from the arrogant heiress who had declared war on the Sterling family months ago. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her face pale, and her eyes darted frantically around the shadows. She was alone. "Where is Oliver?" Vivian shouted over the sound of the crashing waves, holding her hands up to show she was unarmed. Marcus did not raise his voice, but the chilling tenor of it carried perfectly through the damp air. "You are in no position to make demands, Vivian." Vivian's eyes locked onto Claire, and a flash of genuine shock crossed her face. You're supposed to be dead. My men confirmed the hit. I'm afraid I'm much harder to kill than I look, Claire replied, her voice steady and laced with a quiet, polite venom. Your men were sloppy, just as you are sloppy with your accounting. The commission received the dossier an hour ago. You have no allies left. Your accounts are frozen. Your syndicate is being dissolved as we speak. Vivian sneered, a desperate, feral look in her eyes. You think you've won? Do you think I would come here without an insurance policy? She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small electronic detonator. Marcus's enforcers raised their weapons in unison, but Marcus held up a hand, stopping them. There's half a ton of C4 wired to the pylons beneath this pier. Vivian laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. If I press this button, we all drop into the ocean. Give me my brother, Sterling. Give me safe passage out of the country, or I swear to God I will blow us all to hell. Marcus did not blink. He did not move. He simply looked down at Claire, a small, proud smile touching the corner of his lips. Claire calmly reached into the pocket of her cashmere coat and pulled out a small black radio receiver. It had a blinking green light on top. Are you referring to the explosives wired on a secondary frequency? Claire asked politely. The ones your demolitions expert, a man named Owen, planted 4 hours ago. Vivian's face drained of all color. She stared at the detonator in her hand, suddenly realizing the light on it was dead. Owen was quite cooperative once Ethan explained the situation to him, Claire continued, her tone conversational despite the freezing wind and the pain in her chest. We intercepted the frequency. Your detonator is useless. You have nothing left, Vivian. No empire. No leverage. No escape. Vivian fell to her knees on the wet concrete, the useless piece of plastic slipping from her fingers. The arrogant queen of the Ashford Syndicate had been utterly dismantled, not by a barrage of bullets, but by the meticulous, brilliant mind of a plus-sized executive assistant. Marcus stepped forward, drawing a suppressed pistol from his shoulder holster. He looked down at the weeping woman on the ground, feeling absolutely nothing. "What about Oliver?" Vivian sobbed, looking up at him with defeated eyes. "Oliver will be sent back overseas on a cargo ship," Marcus stated coldly. "He'll live the rest of his life knowing that if he ever sets foot in this country again, I will end him. But you, Vivian, you don't get to walk away. You tried to take her from me." Marcus raised the weapon. The suppressed shot was a quiet, deadly whisper in the fog. Vivian Ashford collapsed onto the concrete, her reign of terror extinguished in a single moment. "Turn around, Ethan," Marcus ordered quietly. Ethan and the enforcers immediately turned their backs, giving their boss absolute privacy on the bloody pier. Marcus holstered his weapon and turned to Claire. The adrenaline was fading, and he could see the severe toll the night was taking on her recovering body. She swayed slightly, her grip on the cane whitening. Before she could fall, Marcus swept her into his arms, lifting her with effortless, terrifying strength. He held her securely against his chest, mindful of her broken ribs, burying his face in her dark, vanilla-scented curls. "I have you," he whispered fiercely, carrying her toward his armored SUV. "I have you, and I am never letting you go. You are mine, Claire. Every brilliant, beautiful, soft inch of you is mine to protect." Claire rested her head against his broad shoulder, completely surrendering to the dark, obsessive warmth of the man who ruled the city. She knew the underworld was dangerous and forged in blood, but wrapped in Marcus Sterling's arms, she had never felt safer. "I know," she whispered back, closing her eyes as the imposing boss carried his queen into the night, their empire finally secure.